Go back to one of our main stories tonight, and the EFF says that the explosion yesterday of that gas tanker in Ekurhuleni has revealed cracks in the quality of the country's roads and other infrastructure. It says South Africa's roads are not suitable to transport hazardous substances. Newzroom Afrika now is able to speak, in fact, to Nkululeko Dunga, who's the EFF's Gauteng Chairperson, also the caucus leader in the Ekurhuleni Metro. Good evening to you, sir. Grateful for your time. So, we've heard now that the death toll has risen to 15 people, many more still in a severe condition, burn wounds so extreme that we're not even able to show them on air. What is the party's position on what happened yesterday?
Good evening to you. Good evening to the listeners of Newzroom Afrika. Merry Christmas, although it's a very somber mood to be celebrating Christmas with such tragic event that happened just on the eve of Christmas. Our position still remains the same, that we are one calling for the charging of the CEO of the logistic company. That is one, and this is inspired more than anything to hold someone extremely responsible in understanding that the transportation of hazardous goods is very intricate and requires due diligence in terms of planning, considering that there are a lot of motorists that are on the road and that there's a collapsed train system in South Africa, and therefore you need to be in cognizance of society and the motorists that are on the road when you are actually transporting hazardous items.
Right.
So we are calling for the removal of not only just the removal, but the charging and the criminal charging of the CEO. We're also calling on the state, which is something that we've persistently said at the EFF, that there must be greater intervention by the state to actually create and expand the infrastructure and infrastructure development, particularly in transportation, to ensure that our roads are well equipped and they're able to sustain transportation of goods. So we remain at those points.
Okay. So why do you want the CEO, the head of the company, to be charged when he or she wasn't driving, or he or she did not drive or try to force that truck under the bridge, even though the vehicle was clearly too tall to pass safely?
But look, we'll also, at some stage, well, even at this stage, by the way, is to interrogate as well the state of the infrastructure and the responsibility of the Department of Roads, particularly the city of Ekurhuleni in itself, in terms of roads and stormwater. More especially in that bridge, because we have at some stage complained about it, to say that, particularly when there's a lot of flooding, you can't actually cross through from Boksburg South into the CBD. But the reason why we're calling on the CEO to be criminally charged is for recourse on the family and for actually justice to prevail. In understanding, as we said, that the transportation of hazardous items, particularly in this case gas, it requires extreme levels of planning, route planning, and monitoring. So not only do you plan, but you also have to monitor. And the CEO at a managerial position has the responsibility as well to oversee the operations. And part of operations is also monitoring. And someone has failed in their duty. And when they can identify internally, is for us to identify externally that the accounting officer, who is the CEO, should take the fall for this matter. And you looked at, if you read the media statement of the company in itself, is that they are clueless, they don't know what's going on, they are relying on the driver to give them the information. But there must be someone that is able to tell us by the company in terms of how did that truck get onto that route, because as a resident of Boksburg myself, I know that there's an uphill. There's actually a down and uphill. It's actually at a very bottom level. that bridge, and even speed. You can't speed coming down that route just after passing the Boksburg Library. So there must be an explanation from the company in itself, and they cannot just lay the bulk of the responsibility on the driver itself.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's all dependent on what we learn in the coming days about what was the mapped out route for this vehicle, when did it go off on a different course, if indeed it did, and what intervention came from the company side, if indeed the driver made the decision to drive in a different direction and then leading to this tragedy. And the driver, by the way, I'm not sure if you're aware, he's now been arrested. So your reaction to that as well?
Well, as part of accountability, we've lost 15 lives. There's actually a family that has lost 4 children in this unfortunate tragedy that has taken place. But over and above that, we still call for the arrest as well of the CEO. You know, let's look at it this way: the freeway or the highway, the main routes, are too far off from the CBD of Joburg. Now, this particular tanker was driving into the CBD. If there was proper monitoring by the company in itself, they should have intercepted that their driver has actually went off way outside and actually even driving into the CBD. And if there are routes that are properly outlined by the company in terms of good management and good monitoring skills, they could have and they should have known that there's actually a low-lying bridge whereas the truck cannot pass through. So the fair share of the blame, not only with the driver in itself, but also the company and the managers of the company. And at this point, we can't lay the blame as the EFF and society as well, lay the blame on the operations and the head of operations, and the last person that should be standing is the accounting officer, which is the CEO. So if they as well, they will be truthful to accountability. The most rightful thing to do at this present moment would have been for the CEO to hand himself over or herself over to the police and actually resign from the position.
And this is the latest, just the latest incident, as you well know, a tragedy, in fact, involving a truck on South African roads in Pinetown just 2-3 months ago. There were those school children also killed when a speeding truck rammed into their scholar transport vehicle. A few years ago, you'll remember, brakes failed on another truck, also in KZN. That too wiped out basically a group of people who were passengers in a taxi, right? And there have been conversations ongoing in the country about something that needs to happen to better regulate the movement of trucks, especially in residential areas. What is the EFF's position on that? Should we ban them altogether?
Well, true. There must be constant monitoring and, there are bylaws that speak to the movement of the transportation of hazardous items that are even legislated. But South Africans as well, they are not ready to hear the truth, particularly from the EFF. It's just unfortunate that such a tragic event has to take place. And when we have to actually speak the truth, would be seen as politicking. It was the EFF through the Commander-in-Chief months back that said that the collapse and the direct collapse of the train infrastructure in this country will result in actually our roads being more in a vulnerable position in terms of the transportation of dangerous goods. So therein lies the answer. The ANC-led government collapsed and completely collapsed the train infrastructure, and that was used, in actual fact, to transport such dangerous goods. And we had the infrastructure to go through and actually deposit some of these dangerous goods. I mean, you go to the Witbank area now; the entire freeway and highways are riddled with trucks carrying coal, whereas right next to the lanes lie an empty train track that has no trains and goods trains that can actually move the very same items. And that also has a direct impact on the longevity of the infrastructure of the roads in itself. So there must be time monitoring that needs to take place for the movement of trucks. We've got to do better as government, but the main thing that at this point should be our focus is to revamp and rejuvenate the Transnet and our railway lines.
Thank you very much for that, Nkululeko Dunga, EFF Chairperson, also the party's caucus leader in the Ekurhuleni Council. Thank you for your time tonight.